Hello folks, I'm Alex, this is Alex Unabridged, and it's time to wrap up some recent reads. So welcome back to the channel if that is the case. Yes, I've read a few bits and pieces recently that I have not talked about on the channel yet. Mainly some stuff from the last few weeks for a couple of readathons, a couple of reading events. So that's what I shall do today, is just catch you up on some recent reads. So November has seen two readathons. The Cryptid Readathon, which is hosted by Jason's Weird Reads, Crystal from Fiber Artsy, and Sin over at Sin's Book Nook. And this is all about reading stuff about cryptids. And the other reading event is Novelisation and Tie-in Tember, hosted by Andrew from It Came From The Page, and that of course is all novelisations and tie-ins. So pretty much all of these books, bar one, fit into one of those two readathons. So the first one then, and these are in the order that I read them in the last month or so. The first one is one for the Cryptid Readathon, and that is North American Lake Monsters by Nathan Ballingrud. This is a short story collection, which I had on audiobook. This whole collection, I think, was a mixed bag. There was a couple that I really liked, a couple that I really didn't like, and the rest were good, but not particularly memorable. There's one very good vampire story that I think that's probably my favourite of all the stories. There's a good werewolf story as well that I enjoyed. The final story in the collection is by far and away the best, I think. Not necessarily my favourite, but certainly the best story. It's certainly the most dark, the most kind of chilling, I think, that story. But it's, it kind of covers quite a few different sorts of monsters. It was a little lighter on the cryptids than I'd hoped for. I went into this knowing that it wasn't going to be full-on cryptids, but I hoped kind of for a couple. But it was more the suggestion of cryptids rather than actual kind of tangible cryptids, if you like. Most of the stories are much more about man being the monster, rather than any kind of sort of supernatural or otherworldly creature kind of taking the forefront of the story. There is something in most of them which is, it's got that element to it, but it's much more about humans as the monsters, if you like. Which doesn't necessarily, make it a bad collection in that respect. It wasn't that I'm thinking, oh well, I was sold a bill of goods. No, it's not that. They were decent. Majority of them were good stories, really good stories, but they just didn't stick with me particularly strongly afterwards, as I say, apart from a couple. So I've given this a rating of 6.5 out of 10, and 3 stars. That'll go on Storygraph as 3 stars. So I'd still recommend it if you like a bit of sort of folk horror, elements of folklore, and just some good kind of dark, quite slow paced in some respects. Sort of, dark little stories basically. But it is, like a lot of short story collections, a mixed bag. Okay, then next I read something for the Novelisations and Tie-in Tember event, and I picked Day of Ascension by Adrian Tchaikovsky, and this is a Warhammer 40k novel, and I had this on audio, and this filled one of the prompts, which was to read a book based on a tabletop game. Of course, Warhammer 40k is a tabletop war game. Which I have no interest in playing, but I love the lore. I like painting the miniatures, things like that. But it's really the lore and the fiction that I've really got into with Warhammer. I loved this. This was great. It was, my only criticism of it really is that it was too short. I wanted more. But Tchaikovsky packed in a hell of a lot into a 6-hour audiobook. This, I won't go into a huge amount of detail with this because it needs to go into all of the lore to kind of explain it properly, but this follows kind of two major factions within the world: the Adeptus Mechanicus, who are tech priests, really. They have highly augmented or changed, technologically changed, enhanced physical forms. They kind of believe that flesh is weak, and they are forever trying to augment, enhance their bodies. In this, they perform pretty horrible experiments on people. They are the ruling class, really. They are that they kind of subjugate the rest of the population on the world that this is set on, which I think is called Morod. And they are essentially in opposition to the sort of the more working class humans who have horrible lives. All humans have horrible lives in Warhammer. Most people, most things, everything has horrible lives in Warhammer. It is grimdark. But yes, the humans in this and some of the sort of semi-humans are part of a cult called the Gene Stealer cult, who have some DNA of the Tyranids, who are an alien bug-like race with kind of sort of a hive mind. And they are much more kind of the working class sort of side of things. And the whole plot is essentially about political plotting within the Adeptus Mechanicus, wanting to get rid of the head of the order there, and take up that position themselves. That's kind of that side of it, versus rebellion from the lower classes and from the Gene Stealer cult. So there's a lot going on in it, but it is like Adrian Tchaikovsky absolutely nailed the tone for me, and the atmosphere of the kind of the grim darkness of Warhammer. He really kind of got that setting and environment and atmosphere bang on, but also managed to inject like his own humour and his own sort of sense of sort of writing style into it, enough so that it is recognisably his, but also a part of the canon, the Warhammer canon. It's got great characters in it. It's got a really intriguing plot, plenty of tension, some great action, lots of subterfuge, lots of nasty characters. And yeah, it was just a really, really good time. I had a lot of fun with this one. And I really, really want Warhammer Games Workshop to give Adrian Tchaikovsky something else to write within this world. Something longer, please. Maybe a series. But then I'm biased because I'm a big Adrian Tchaikovsky fan. But yeah, I think his style, and certainly his dark humour, his dry wit, works really well within that environment. So I gave this one an 8.5 out of 10. And this came out as a 4.5 stars on the story graph. So yeah, really, really like this. If you are into Warhammer, I thoroughly recommend that book. It's a really great start for Adrian Tchaikovsky into writing for that world. Okay, the next one I read then was another one for the Novelisations and Tie-in Tember event. And this one was Alien: The Cold Forge by Alex White. This was also an audiobook. I'm big into my audiobooks at the moment. This sort of filled the prompt for the event that was about reading a novelisation of one of your favourite pieces of media. This is not a novelisation, of course. This is a tie-in to the Alien universe. But Alien is one of my favourite films, so I went for this one. This was brilliant. This was absolutely brilliant. I have a new favourite villain out of any books that I think I've read. Dorian, who is an auditor for the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, is sent to the Cold Forge to basically make cuts, which means sacking people, and save money. That is his job. He does that all around. He is such a nasty piece of work. I had seen various people talk about this book, Ollie and Andrew, and there's been others as well I've seen, but certainly those two, Ollie and Andrew. had said about like Dorian being such a horrible but great character, and they are absolutely right. Um, he is brutal, calculating. He's despicable in the way that he behaves. And as it goes on, you really kind of understand quite how psychopathic he is. Um, the aliens are scary. Do you know what I mean? Aliens, xenomorphs, facehuggers, chestbursters, all that, they are scary. But they are not the scariest thing in the Cold Forge. That would be Dorian. Um, this is written from it's a dual point of view book, so you get sort of chapters from Dorian's perspective. It's also written in present tense, so it feels quite immediate. There's a real good energy to it, but yeah, it's written partly from Dorian's perspective, and then also from Blue Marcellus's perspective, and she is a geneticist working with the aliens, researching stuff to do with the aliens on the Cold Forge. The Cold Forge is a space station essentially. Blue has a degenerative illness and has some serious mobility issues, amongst other health conditions, health problems associated with this degenerative illness. And so she pilots an android called Marcus. She is a queer character, and there's some really interesting gender stuff that comes in with Blue piloting a male form in the form of Marcus. It's not kind of really gone into in any depth, but there's enough there just to kind of ask questions and kind of sort of give interest to that kind of sort of situation. The atmosphere in this is absolutely top notch. It is tense from beginning to end. It has a fantastic plot with twists and turns and intrigue and mystery and action and horror. Do you know what I mean? It's got everything in there. Alex White can seriously write, especially the characters. As I say, Dorian is fantastic, the way that he is written, and Blue as well. And I mean, like, all the characters are very flawed, and there's complexity there for sure. Yeah, I had so much fun with this. This was one where I really could not wait to be able to sit down again in the next evening and continue on with it. I will definitely be reading some more of Alex White's work, especially any alien stories that they write. Into Charybdis is one of theirs, and that's next on my list for sure. I gave this a 9 out of 10. And this is a 5-star read. This was absolutely outstanding, especially as an alien novel. I do like the alien novels that I've read so far, but this one will take some beating. Okay, so that's all the full-length novels that I read and short story collections. I then went back to the Cryptid Readathon. I was going to read Cryptids by David Haynes, but I was running out of time. I wasn't sure I'd get it finished by today, basically. And so I had a little scout around. I was searching for some shorts, and came up with some older pieces that I thought might fit. These aren't explicitly kind of about particular cryptids, well-known cryptids, but they're definitely influenced by that sort of thing. Creatures kind of possibly of legend, strange monsters of myth, that kind of thing. So I've got 3 short older stories. So the first one was The Terror of Blue John Gap by Arthur Conan Doyle, and this is the first Arthur Conan Doyle story that I have ever read, for shame. And this was really good fun. This is set not far from where I live, in Derbyshire, over towards Castleton. Castleton is mentioned in this story, and this is kind of set within that sort of region because it is all caves. There are so many caves over there. I mean, in Castleton alone, I think there are 4 different show caves you can go into, and it is very much that there's lots of, you know, mine shafts and caves hidden here, there, and everywhere. So it really kind of felt right, the setting for that story. It's a very short story, but it is about a guy who is there recuperating, staying with a couple of old maids, as he puts it, and he hears about this legend in the Blue John Gap cave, and there is something that the locals are very afraid of, some monster that comes out on occasion and steals sheep. So our protagonist decides he's going to go into the cave and try and find out what is going on, because he doesn't believe these myths of a monster. And so that is what he does. And as you might imagine, you know, he finds more than he bargained for. Yeah, this was great. I really enjoyed this. I gave this an 8 out of 10. It was very good fun. It was short and sweet. I really liked the fact that it had a connection to an area that I know. It had some great atmosphere, some great tension when he was in the cave, and you know, he'd only taken candles down there, and he managed to get his candles and his matches wet, and couldn't see anything, had to wait in the dark, hearing all of these strange noises. So yeah, really enjoyed that one. Okay, the second short story I read was The Cave of Horror by S.P. Meek. This one set in America, at a cave called Mammoth Cave, which was which is a tourist cave, but they've had to shut it because visitors have been disappearing. They've been taken deep into the cave, and this follows a Secret Service agent and a scientist of some variety, Dr. Bird, who go to Mammoth Cave to try and figure out what this thing is in the cave, and they come up with lots of scientific experiments and ways to try and find out what this thing is, because it's invisible. Of course, it's invisible, and you know, find a way to see it and defeat it, essentially stop it from being able to kill people. This one is bonkers, and there is some interesting sort of science bits in it. It feels quite Jules Verne in a lot of ways, like Journey to the Centre of the Earth. It's got elements of that kind of tone to it. But yeah, it was quite bonkers, and the monster in it is quite bonkers as well. It has elements of a couple of different cryptids to it. So, you know, it could be various different things, but I think it's probably just a made up kind of thing more than anything else. But yeah, it was still highly entertaining. I gave this one a 7 out of 10. And then the third one that I read was A Tropical Horror by William Hope Hodgson. This one is set on a ship at sea. This is told from the perspective of a 19-year-old member of the crew, who is up on deck one night on watch, with a young apprentice, 14-year-old apprentice called Jokey, and something comes over the side of the ship. They're on a trip between Melbourne and London, and something slithers over the side of the ship and proceeds to eat most of the crew. And it is the story of this crew, this lad on board the ship, and how he survives, essentially. But yeah, I really liked this one. I thought the tone of this one was excellent. The writing in this was great. I have never read any William Hope Hodgson, and one of the reasons why I picked this one is because I do have some more Hodgson on a reading list for my horror project that I'm doing, my horror reading project next year. And now I'm really excited to read some more Hodgson. I'm kind of, he's one that I'm kind of like, yeah, do you know what, actually I can see myself reading a lot more of this stuff. I really enjoyed the kind of the maritime element of it, and I think a lot of his stuff is set at sea or in a maritime kind of environment, because he was a sailor. And yeah, this, as I say, the monster in this, I think it's potentially based on like Leviathan. It's certainly some sort of a sea serpent. Almost kind of, it feels like maybe it's alluding to, you know, the old maps and the here be monsters. on old nautical maps, things like that, old world maps. I think it's, you know, potentially even alluding to that. It's quite a strange monster. But yeah, this was the shortest of the three stories, but I think this one packed the most punch for sure. This one had the most atmosphere, the most tension to it. It had the strongest character voice in it, I think. And I just really enjoyed the writing style of Hodgson's. So yeah, really looking forward to reading some more of his stuff next year. So that is all of my readathon stuff done. The only other thing that I read in the last few weeks was something that I ended up rereading in its entirety as I prepared for my poetry video that came out on Friday. And that was Are Women People? A Book of Rhymes for Suffrage Times by Alice Duer Miller. And I went to that to find a couple of poems that I remember from my 20s when I first read that book, and ended up rereading the whole thing because it's very short, but also highly entertaining, and I thoroughly recommend that. It is exactly what it says. It is a book of poems, satirical poems by Alice Duer Miller, all around kind of women's suffrage in the United States and the fight for votes for women. And yeah, it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. I will link in the description to the Project Gutenberg page where you can download this, because it is, of course, public domain now. So I thoroughly recommend having a look at it. It's brilliant. Okie dokes. So that is everything that I've read over the last few weeks, since the beginning of November. I am currently just over halfway through This Is How You Lose the Time War by Max Gladstone and Amal El Motar. That's a very short science fiction book, modern science fiction book, which I will get finished tonight, but so far very good. I will save more for that for when I do my full review on it next week. That's for my science fiction for the Somewhat Hesitant Reading Project. But I need to get that finished up tonight, because what I've got coming up next is a buddy read with Lecton from Reading from the Depths, which begins tomorrow. Tomorrow we will be starting City of Last Chances by Adrian Tchaikovsky, which I'm super excited about. Not just because it's more Adrian Tchaikovsky, but because it's a buddy read with Lecton, which should be great, and it is some fantasy, which I am not a big reader of at all. But if anyone can get me into some fantasy, it's probably Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is the first in the Tyrant Philosophers fantasy series, and it sounds potentially quite dark, quite political, but it also seems like it's going to have some of Tchaikovsky's trademark humour in it as well. And yeah, I'm just really intrigued to see what he does with it, and to do it as a buddy read with somebody who knows a lot more about fantasy than I do, but doesn't know Adrian Tchaikovsky at all. Lecton hasn't read any Adrian Tchaikovsky yet, so this will be his first. That should be really good. We're both really looking forward to it. So coming up next then in my reading, I still have another science fiction book to finish off for November, which is, when I find it, this one, We Who Are About To by Joanna Russ. So I've got to finish that off before the end of the month, really, but it's quite a short book, so that shouldn't be too much of a problem. And then into December, I've got a fair few bits on the slate. Carrie will be read, this fabulous edition of Carrie, as part of my, that's the first one in my Stephen King reading project, where I'm reading all of King's novels in publication order. And then, other than that, my science fiction for next month will be Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. Really looking forward to that. That will be an audiobook. And Space Opera by Catherine M. Valente as my sort of contemporary queer sci-fi pick. And then I've got various other potentials for December, including Rendezvous with Rama by Arthur C. Clarke, The 12 by Justin Cronin, that's the second in the Passage trilogy. Reread The Passage in September, so I want to do a reread of The 12 in December if I can fit that in. It's quite long though. Birdman by Mo Hader is another one, a bit of dark crime, serial killery stuff. And also then, if I can fit it in, The Doors of Eden. So some more Adrian Tchaikovsky. I do want to get through Adrian Tchaikovsky's back catalogue, one a month-ish if I can. So I've got plenty of things to dip into, dependent on my mood as well. The last thing to tell you about before I head off for today is a couple of acquisitions. I am on the Read What You Own project at the moment, so I'm not buying physical books or ebooks, but I do still have Audible credits to use, and so I'm allowed to use those. And there was a 2-for-1 sale this week, so I picked up 2 for 1 and I went for Skaven Slayer and also Demon Slayer, which are books 2 and 3 in the Gotrek and Felix series, which is Warhammer Fantasy. I read Troll Slayer, which is the first book in the series, back in September, July, summerish, and loved it. It was great, and so I want to continue on with that series, but I decided to switch to audio for those. I had that as an ebook, but I'm going to switch to audio because I'm in on an audiobook kind of mode at the moment. So yes, they were both in 2-for-1, so I have grabbed those so they can sit in my collection ready for some more Warhammer Fantasy when the mood takes me. But that is it. That will do for today. I think I've caught you up on what I've read and what I potentially will be reading in the next month or so. So yes, that will do for today. So thank you very much for watching, folks. As always, do drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do let me know if you've read anything I've talked about today and what you thought of it, or if there's anything that's on my potentials list that you think, oh yeah, read that. Let me know that in the comments below. It's always lovely to hear from you anyway. I will be back on Friday with my thoughts on This Is How You Lose the Time War. So I do hope you'll join me for that then. But from me, for now, that's ta-ra.